Okay, here we go. I am Adolfo Marinucci. I'm a software developer from Italy. I hope you are enjoying Solution1 conference. I'm here to show you what you can build in .NET MAUI using MauiReactor library. And I'll show you how you can use an alternative UI framework for building .NET MAUI application using the MVU design pattern. Okay, let's get this started. What is .NET MauiReactor? MauiReactor is a UI library written on top of .NET MAUI controls that allows developers to write applications for mobile and desktop using the MVU pattern. MVU stands for Model View Update. If you are wondering what MVU is, in broader terms, we can say that it's the same development model adopted by frameworks such as Flutter, ReactNative, SwiftUI. So we can say we are in good company. If you have previous experience in these kind of frameworks like Flutter or ReactNative or SwiftUI, also SwiftUI, you'll find some similarities in .NET MAUI Reactor library. So what's the real difference between MVVM model and MVU model? In MVVM approach, you usually have to define a UI layer inside an XML file and describe its behavior in a view model class. In MVU, you have to define both view and view models at the same time in the same class. Also, usually in a view approach, you don't call that view and view model. You are usually referred to components. And a component is a class that describes both your view and your logic. For example, I'll show you how a MVU application looks like. For example, let's see this application that comes from mainly the standard default template, or when you create a new application using the default template for .NET MAUI framework. So on the left, you'll see the main page XML view. On the right, there is the main page view model class. On the left, you have the description of your, the definition of your views. You have a scroll view, content pages, stack layout, and so on. On the right, you have a class that usually is derived from a class, like in this case, observable object, that implement the notify property changes interface. In this case, I've used the community toolkit MVView package. I suggest you to use it every time you want to build an application that is different from an Hello World application. In this case, I'm using a couple of properties like the counter or the counter label, and I'll define it with the observable property. So I also defined an increment command. So when I push the button, let me start it in the meanwhile. When I push the button on the view, I also call .NET MAUI framework will call my increment method, and I have the text inside the button updated thanks to this binding markup. Okay, this is the MVVM model, MVVM approach. Let's see how it looks MVU approach. Okay. This is the same, exactly the same view in .NET MAUI Reactor. In .NET MAUI Reactor, you actually are defining components. A component may have a state, but this we will see this later. If in this case, if I run the application, I get the same exactly behavior. So if I click the button, I have the counter updated. So I have a new text for my button. As you can see, the real difference here is that you can actually put both the command and the property update inside your components. So for example, here you can use the state counter to actually create the string that you like. On the other side, inside the on-clicked button, on-clicked event, you can just call setState to update the counter and refresh the component. Okay, getting started with MauiReactor. You can develop MauiReactor application in Windows and Mac, and you can also, of course, target Android, iOS, Windows, and Mac, and mostly is the same as the .NET MAUI. Actually, MauiReactor is just a library that sits on top of .NET MAUI controls. It also supports CLI, Visual Studio 2022, Visual Studio 2022 for Mac, Visual Studio Code, and JetBrains Rider. It's recommended, but of course it's not required, to install also the .NET command for the Hot-Reload feature, and also the .NET Startup project template. I see it's recommended because I usually use every time Hot-Reload when I build application with MauiReactor. And it's a really cool feature, I think, of the .NET MauiReactor. And I think you enjoy to use it in your application development. We'll see Hot-Reload in a couple of minutes. Currently, I have to say the MauiReactor doesn't support these devices. Okay, what's the real advantages of using MVU instead of MVVM model? Well, first of all, you have a real full hot-reloading experience. With hot-reloading experience, with hot-reload feature in MauiReactor, it's possible to write an application without restarting it at every file change. So it's a real boost for your productivity. So MauiReactor let, for example, change code inside your components. You can, for example, change how the page is rendered, adding widgets, removing widgets, of course. You can also add methods. You can even also change a component from a componentless type to a component with the state. So you can create classes, you can create methods, you can even debug your application after you have reloaded it. And we'll see it in a demo. Also, I found that MVU is much less verbose. So if you are going to build an application that is really complex, you have to take care to write this application so that it's easy to understand, it's easy to debug. Of course, the approach from MVVM of writing your view and creating also a code behind classes and a view model class bring to a much verbosity. Even if you are using fantastic packages like Community Turkey for MVVM. Okay. Okay, let's start from the hot-reload feature. That is the core feature, I guess, for MauiReactor. Okay, it's not required at all that you know or you understand how actually the MauiReactor hot-reload function. In reality, you have just to understand that the hot-reload works with two components. there is the first component that is a console program that monitors the project folder for file changes. So anytime you change and save a file, a source code file, of course, a source code file of your project, it detects this file change, even if you rename or delete a file, and compile a new assembly from the new source code. This assembly is then transmitted to the running application inside the emulator, but also to the device that may be attached to your PC or your Mac, or also, of course, to your current desktop application that is running, okay? The second part of the MauiReactor Hot-Reload is inside the MauiReactor library, where you find a small set of classes that actually receive this assembly, extract components inside of it, and replace the components to the components that are running at that moment. Let's see what I'm saying. Okay. Hot-Reload demo. Okay, stop it. Okay, we have a page that is a standard page that comes from the standard template. Okay, the emulator is crashed, is now restarting. Let's wait a seconds. Let's see if now it starts. Okay. Okay, great. Now, if you look at this component, now I will see how Hot-Reload is working. I have created a few menu items, component menu items that just run the console program that I said before. And in this case, I will run the Hot-Reload module for Android. It starts like this, and it started to monitor my folder, the folder containing my project. And you can consider these, you can look at the documentation of MauiReactor to see what are the commands and the option you have to run Hot-Reload. In this case, we are running Hot-Reload in simple mode. We explain later what means, what you can do with Hot-Reload in simple mode. Okay, just let's change something and see what happens. Okay. Okay, as you can see, the application is updated. I can change everything, and at the same time is automatically updated. One cool feature of Hot-Reload is that it preserves my state. So for example, if I click here, I have an updated state. I have the counter that is at value 8. So here I have the string that says click 8 times. If I now change this string from click to tapped, okay. As you can see here, the application was updated and the state was preserved. So you actually see you tapped 8 times. This is really cool because if you have the state maintained between two versions of the component, you can, for example, debug, or you can say, you can, for example, change your views when you have actually already interacted with the view. So you already changed that state. So you can also see the view how work when you have a state different from the initial state. Okay, let's dig in a bit more. I'll show you now. So, for example, I can, of course, change everything else, like removing the image, and so on. I'll show you now how we can, at the same time, debug our application, even when you have started and hot-reloaded it. So, to debug the application, even with a hot-reloaded app, you have to run the hot-reload in full mode. As said, simple mode and full mode are deeply described in the documentation, okay? Anyway, for this demo, I'll show you that now, when I start the application and I click on the button, of course, this breakpoint is it. So, for example, if I click now, Visual Studio correctly hit my breakpoint. Let's go ahead. Now, let's change a bit the view, like this. Okay, I save at this time. Or I have my view updated, and say you clicked one time. Now, if I break here and I click the button, I still see my breakpoint hit by Visual Studio. And this is really, really cool, because actually I'm using a new version of the app. I'm using a new version of the view. And here I have all the great features coming from the debug in Visual Studio, for example. And for example, I can see the state counter. I don't know if you see. Okay, the state counter value. That is one. I can, for example, go ahead. I see that state counter is updated to true. And of course, I can also update my counter to another value. Just a few. Okay, I updated the state counter to 10. If I run now, you clicked 10 times. So I was able to intercept my breakpoint. With my breakpoint, I was able to intercept value from the state property. I was able to change the value inside my state property. Okay, let's move on. Okay, there are a lot of things to say about MauiReactor, so unfortunately I have to speed up things. I'm sure you'll be able to make all your tests using all the sample code that is provided inside the MauiReactor repository. Okay, MauiReactor components. Components are the core of a MauiReactor application. All applications are built with pages, and each page is represented by a tree of components. Okay, a component has a render method that is called by MauiReactor every time the component needs to present it on the page. Inside components, you can create standard Maui widgets like buttons, entry panels like a stack or grid, as well as create other components that are so-called child components. Components may accept values from the containing component in the form of property values. In property values, in some frameworks like Flutter or React are also said props. Okay. So let's see the differences that are between components with state and without state. Of course, components may hold the state and are so-called stateful components. Okay, components are also without the state are said stateless component, and contrast do not have state. This is pretty clear. The MAUI reactor provide the same exactly behavior in the same way. In other words, components, stateful components, stateless components work and behave exactly in the same. They can define the properties, they can render content through the render method as well. You have two methods to update state in a stateful components. There are two different ways of updating state. You can just update the state with a call to the set state, and this invalidates the current component and requires a full refresh of the component tree. Instead, if you use set state but pass over the invalidate component set to false, you are just asking to MauiReactor to update the state and update the properties linked, bound to the property values of the state, but without invalidates, without refresh the entire component tree. It's surely faster method, but it can work in all cases. Let's see what I mean. Okay. Let's see the component demo. Okay. Okay. Let's start it. Okay. We have the usual view where there is a button that I can click and update my state. Okay. Now, if I run the Hot-Reload module in full mode, and I add a write line here, so I want to output a render string, just a render string, every time the render method is called. And I run a click on the button. I can see here that in the output pane, I see a lot of render calls. So this means that the render method is called every time I click the button. So the component is refreshed, the component tree is all invalidated. So seem pretty difficult. In some way, you can say that is not much performant. Let's see how we can improve this kind of situation. For example, if I click, if I use the overload of the set state function, setting invalidate component to false, and I save, I now have a different behavior. So if I click, I do not have anymore the render, okay? So I can say that the render method is not called, but at the same time, of course, the text inside the property text of the button is not updated. To make it updating when I click the button, I have to use a different overload of the text method. So what I'm saying here is that I want to give to MauiReactor a function that return, in this case, a string that should be called every time I click the button. So if I click the button, that function must be used, and the text property must be updated. Okay, so now if I save and I click the button, I see now that the button is updated with the correct counter, with the current text. And also I see that in the output pane, no render is called. What this means? This means that this render method is not called. This means that the component is not refreshed. This means that it's a lot faster. Okay, so you may wonder why we don't use always this method. Well, this approach can be useful in many cases, but not in all cases. For example, if I want to use the state properties here, like for example, I want to test the counter for even values. For example, I would want to create a label, say even, and otherwise remove the label from the tree. If I make this change, if I click nothing action, nothing happen because the render method is not called, because I'm calling set state with invalidate component at false. So if I change this back to true and I remove here this overload and I save, I should now be able, as you can see, change the property state and be sure that the entire component is invalidated and refreshed. So let's move on. Okay. At this point, we have to see MauiReactor components with their own children. Of course, MauiReactor components may have their own shield that can display or arrange in any way. And of course, components, this feature is really useful when you have to arrange elements on the screen without requiring you to create a custom model, a custom panel. So for example, say you want to customize how a panel like a stack layout panel works. In .NET MAUI, usually you have to override in code the behavior of the stack layout panel. In this case, you have just to create a component and accept children when it's created, and then you can just arrange these components as you like. In this demo, I'll show you briefly how you can work with children, or when you can work with children components. Let me close this. Okay. Okay. Let's start with the small modified version. Let me take this one. Okay. For example, say we have a login page like this. Okay. For example, now I have a login page where it shows a username with an entry, something like that. And I want to show you that I can actually change these components in a way that I can use child components, children components, to rearrange the main components. So, for example, let's say we want to tie together label and entry and create a child component. Maybe we can call it entry with label. If you create an entry with label that's like this and use it in our main component, for example, like this. Okay. Okay. The behavior seems quite the same. Of course, I have now, okay, of course, I have to run the reload. Okay, let's start making a fake change. Okay, now we have two labels with the same name, because of course here we are coding the username string. We want to, of course, write a label according to what it wants the parent container, the container component. So we are going to add a label property like that. We are going to use this label field inside our component like this. And we want to use the label in this way. So I pass over my label in both child component. Okay. So now I have username and password correctly updated. One thing that I want to show you as last thing for this demo is how I can take the values inside that I entered inside entry and display it on the screen. So let's add a couple of properties inside our state called username and password. Let's add a way for the entry with label component to raise a event anytime user enters some text inside the entry. So I can now just use this code like this. Okay. So we are now getting the username and the password from the entry field. And when the user click on sign in button, I want to display this message containing the value or entering in the username property value. So if I set something like this, click sign in, okay, I have a message that say hello there, Adu. Okay, let's move on. Okay, MauiReactor animation. MauiReactor fully supports animation in your apps. There are actually two different ways to enable animations in your application, and you are free to use both of them, mix both of them inside your components. And RX animation, also called property animation, are easy to use animation that are perfectly integrated in the MVU model and allows to animate properties between values, between state values. We'll see a small demo in a few moments. Animation controller is instead a powerful class that lets you apply for much more complex animation inside your components. MauiReactor also supports animation using an imperative model, like the standard model you are used to with .NET MAUI. So in short, using the view extensions. Okay, let's see how we can trigger animation in MauiReactor. Okay, so let's move to the animation demo. Okay. Okay, let's start it. Okay, here you can see a page, inside that a button. This button has two properties set other than the other H center and V center. You have a scale properties that is linked to the state toggle property. You have the opacity property that is linked to the state toggle. So when I click on the button, the toggle moves from false to true and from true to false. And accordingly, you have the scale and the opacity move. If I click, you can see that the button is animated. Okay, so the core method to animate properties between values is the method with animation. With animation, you are actually saying to MauiReactor to animate any properties that comes before it. So, for example, if I move with animation here, and of course, I have to hot-reload the application. And hot-reload application, I can see that when I click, the opacity is no more animated. So opacity moves from 1 to 0.5 and vice versa without animation. So of course you can change editing or duration of the animation, easy function, and so on. Another way to build animation in MauiReactor is using animation controller. Animation controller that is shown in this example is a way for you to define animations that are more complex. So you are not going to move around, just move around property values. You want to control the animation. You want to put it in pause. You want to stop it, etc., and so on. So, for example, let's say we have a function like a render method like this. Okay, I have an image. I have inside a content a page, and also I'm going to define an animation controller. Inside the animation controller, I have a sequence animation, and inside it a double animation. So what I'm going to create now is something like this. I have an animation of the image using a rotation value. What I'm going to do here is that I want an animation that move from minus 30 to plus 30 in 1 second using an easy function linear. So when every time the animation needs to fire a tick, I have to subscribe the method on tick, and when is fired, I just get the V parameter that in this case is a double value, and I am going to apply the V parameter inside the rotation property. At the same time, the rotation property is sent to the image here every time the page is refreshed. So let's dig a bit deeper in this kind. I want to to show you how can be complex an animation with the animation controller. I have an example here, like this one. Okay. Not too much. Okay, just the sequence animation. Okay. I have to add a translation property. And use it here. Okay. As you can see, now the image is first rotated and then translated. Hopefully you can see clearly the image that is moving. Okay, so in this case, what I wanted to show you is just that you can actually create more complex application, complex animation using the animation controller. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Okay, another important things about MauiReactor is graphics. It's really a cool feature that I have added some months ago that I'm going to use every day, almost every day for my application. Usually in .NET MauiReactor developers can draw graphics objects like lines, shapes, text directly on a canvas using a graphics view control or directly or via a SkiA-sharp canvas. And MauiReactor supports both approach, but it also introduced a new way through the canvas view control, specifically built to allow a declarative MVU friendly approach. I'm going to show you a demo that let you understand better what I'm saying. Okay, this really short demo about graphics here. Okay, so let's start the application. We have a canvas view that is actually clear. Let's start the hot reload. So in the first part, I will show you how you can just draw inside a graphics view. So like this. To draw inside a graphics view, you have just to create a graphics view. You have just to provide a method that issues some commands to the canvas. As you have done this, you actually have the ability to write everything. You can change, of course, everything here. You can change all the issue comments. You can create other methods, something like that. Inside the draw some object, of course, you can use also states values. So, for example, you can make something like that. Okay. If I click here, the counter is updated, and at the same time, the rotation is updating as well. So I'm using the state property values inside the draw method. Okay, let's move on quickly. So I'll show you how you can use the canvas view. The canvas view is the new feature from MauiReactor. You can create objects just declaring it without creating schema-like commands. In this case, I just create a text inside my canvas view. Of course, I can change everything as always. Also, I can create a minimal layout. For example, I can create a column that is just a grid. It's appear like a grid with a single column. With the column, you can organize, you can stack elements inside the canvas view, and you have here the resulting appearance of the view. So you can use a lot of widgets inside the canvas view. You can use layout panels like column, like a group that's like more like a Z stack. You can use, of course, a row. You can move around your object, align this object to some border on top, on bottom, or where you want. Just a note about Canvas View. Canvas View is really a cool feature. It's really important if you want, say, to write controls that are owner drawn, controls that are perfectly pixel aligned to the pixel. So, for example, if you want to, or if you have to follow UI design, for example, coming from Figma, you can, thanks to graphics control, actually make a pixel perfect owner draw control. So a few words about MauiReactor capability to integrate third-party control. You can integrate third-party controls directly into MauiReactor application through the package scaffold generator. I have a demo for this. I have prepared a demo to show you how you, for example, can integrate easily with the maps control that comes with the latest version .NET MAUI. Okay, here we go. So I have a control here. I can, of course, let me start the reload. I can, of course, integrate something else like a pin, like position, and so on. For example, I show you how I can, for example, integrate pins like this inside my components. For example, I show you how I, for example, I can handle the on-map click event. In this short demo, I handle my on-map clicked and I add the position that is clicked in my state position properties that then I show on my map. Let you see how it's working. Okay, now if I click around, I just add a pin. Every pin has the correct label. So let's move on. Okay. MauiReactor repository on GitHub has a lot of sample projects that you can look around. There is the Weather 21 app that is a direct porting of the official .NET MAUI app to MauiReactor. You have a calculator sample application that is perfectly working and also feature a really great dark light theme. Also, you have the content example application that show you how you can create owner draw controls using the canvas view following a Figma project. There is also a sliding puzzle, just a simple game showing nice animation, in particular RX animation. So what's next? Before close my speech, I want to show you my Figma plugin, a Figma plugin that I'm working on. And it's a tool that allows you to generate code from Figma projects. So if you have Figma project, you can connect to it and you can generate code for the canvas view control. So let me show it. Okay. Okay. Of course, this is an application for desktop. So you have here an application that starts on the Windows that, of course, use MauiReactor to build this interface. If you are curious, of course, this source code shows also how you can easily create a tree view in MauiReactor. When you click and select an object inside your project, automatically the code for the canvas view is generated. So of course, this is an early preview, but I wanted to show you that will be this tool available for you, for all of us, or for all of you in the coming months. Also, you can get a look at the source that the Figma REST API is coming back. And for the last thing, I want you talk just a bit about MauiReactor test. I wanted to create a library that will ease the creation of unit test and integration test for MauiReactor. So it will be compatible with the most standard testing feature like XUnit, nUnit, MSTest. I, of course, do not have a demo for this, just a small snippets. One I wanted to show you is that I want to create a library for testing that let us easily host a component, easily intercept an entry and set it text, or easily, for example, intercept a button and issue a click event. Of course, I should be able to test the content of labels or entry on button and so on. I should be able to also check that the structure of my component is what I'm expecting. If you know how work Playwright from Microsoft, is something that that is similar to that framework. Okay, so I have it's all for my presentation. If you have any question, I'll be happy to answer. I'm following questions that comes from Discord chat, also from YouTube, and Okay, what was the original reason for you to come up with MauiReactor? So the real original reason was that I wanted to be more productive. Okay, so when I first built MauiReactor for Xamarin Forms. When I started to work with Xamarin Forms, so of course I created application using the MVVM model with XML model. But then I shortly realized that there should be another way to auto-reload my application. So just to not have to restart the application every time. So how does Reactor UI differ from Comet since both are MVU? Okay, yes, this is a good question. And really, I'm not an expert of Comet library, but I know that Comet works at a lower level. So Comet works at the handler level. So the real difference is that MauiReactor works on top of .NET controls, .NET MAUI controls. So this means, for example, that the very real benefits, the real benefits are that you can actually reuse your XAML. For example, if you have resources that define themes, something like that, you can reuse in MauiReactor. Also, you can integrate third-party controls without requiring the vendor to create handler for Comet, for example. And yeah, that are the main advantages, in my opinion, to use something like MauiReactor. Even if Comet, I know, is a great library, so at the end of the day, all depends on your requirement. It's just your requirement, a requirement of your projects. So can I use Aloha Kit controls in MauiReactor? Why not? Yes, Aloha Kit is a kit of controls that works perfectly in MauiReactor, and I didn't try to integrate it. I integrated many other controls and was straightforward. So I think they also should be easy to integrate Aloha Kit. So I know that Aloha Kit contains also a canvas view implementation, a property canvas view implementation. So you can actually choose between the canvas view implementation coming from MauiReactor and the canvas view implementation coming from Aloha Kit. Since this was your first conference talk, I think, how do you feel now? How do you greet? Really happy to have you. It's my first conference. I'm usually have calls with my clients because I usually work as freelancer, and it's quite strange. I was nervous for all the day, but anyway, and now that's it's going to end. I'm feeling really great. Thank you for the question. I'm also curious how it differs from Comet. I haven't watched that talk yet. Yeah, as said before, Comet works at a lower level. I'm not an expert of Comets. I'm sure it has a great feature. What I can say, as said before, regarding MauiReactor is that MauiReactor working at a higher level allows also to be more to be more anyway we can integrate you can integrate third-party controls, you can integrate your resources. Also, it's much easier, in my opinion, to stay aligned with the .NET MAUI controls. For example, now that the .NET MAUI has arrived to the 7 version, I was able to just rebuild MauiReactor in an hour and provide the MauiReactor for .NET 7 in a short period. Beside the Figma station, is there a roadmap of the feature we can expect to come next to my next? Okay, the Figma station is something that I'm working on these days. I want to create a Figma tool that's really useful. So I want to create a preview of what you are selecting from your project. And also I want to create a source code generator case that is neat enough, that is neat enough to create code that is also optimized for the canvas view. So yeah, I'm working on these weeks. I started just last week, so I hopefully provide a working version in the coming weeks. Yeah. How does it compare to Reactive UI? So Reactive UI is a completely different library if compared to MauiReactor. If I know well, even if I'm not an expert of Reactive UI, is a way to create, especially MVVM application, using a slightly different approach than that used, for example, from the community toolkit for MVVM. So in this case, I can say that Reactive UI is completely another thing if compared to MauiReactor. I can say that you can use Reactive UI inside inside a MauiReactor application, but as I said, the real great feature of MauiReactor, in my humble opinion, of course, is the use of the MVVM model that let you hot-reload your component completely. Okay, so you can hot-reload the complete application. I can say that in many cases when I develop an application in MauiReactor and I'm going to build, I'm building some application that are going to the production stage before the end of the year, I usually restart my application just 1 or 2 times in an hour of development. So that is the main feature of MauiReactor, and I'm not sure that Reactive UI can be used to achieve the same things. Okay. And if there are questions, just let me know. Okay. Yeah, I see also some questions from the YouTube channel. Yeah, Comet is a powerful grid system. Maybe go and take a look. Yes, sure. But anyway, as said, Comet. Yeah, there are no more questions. Yeah, just answering a question from a user that I saw on YouTube, and I'm going to close. Yes, Comet has a powerful grid system, and as I said, Comet had to create a grid system because, of course, it works at a lower level. Anyway, if as I understand there aren't no more questions, I would like to thank you so much to attend my session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.